The crew of KAL-007 never activated the waypoint navigation system.
The INS was functioning properly, had been loaded properly, and was counting along the route where it was thought it was supposed to be. But the autopilot was not following the INS commands. Instead, it was following a compass mode.
So it's only telling them where they're supposed to be.
Investigators learned that even though the plane was following a compass heading and not the waypoints, the computer would have continued to display their intended waypoints even though the plane was nowhere near them.
Green Air 007, position over Nippy, estimating NOCA 1826132.0.
This may explain why the crew never noticed their mistake. The crew also didn't notice a key indication that they were badly off course.
We're experiencing an unexpectedly strong tailwind.
How much of a tailwind?
35 knots from 0.
The fact that they were experiencing completely different weather patterns to a plane supposedly minutes behind them should have alerted them to the problem.
Now, there's a point where you see him teetering on the brink of realizing something is horribly wrong. He's talking to the pilot behind him, and the winds are almost 180 degrees apart, and there's a pause, and Shun is somewhere in his mind, as he's a pilot, and he has the instinct, you know, this is odd. Is it a clue to something I should look into? And he doesn't. And at that point, he might as well pull the gun out and put it to his head.
It was human error. A complacent crew in the middle of the night had their flight computer on the wrong setting, and then didn't notice they were straying off course. When investigators combined the conversation data from Flight 007 with intercepted Soviet transmissions, they get a detailed picture of what went wrong on September the 1st, 1983. The pilots believed they were on course, but 3 hours into the flight, their magnetic heading took them into Soviet airspace over Kamchatka. The Soviet military had been tracking a US reconnaissance plane.
There was a real American spy plane. It was there. There were two planes that looked alike. When KAL penetrated the border, the perception was that this was the plane.
As the passengers sleep through their long journey, the Soviets scramble fighters to intercept the plane.
The identity of the plane was just not known. The clues that it was a lost civilian airliner, well, might have been there. The clues that it was 135 didn't add up, but the Soviets involved didn't have time to think it through.
Target traveling at high speed and approaching border.
But the fighters are not fast enough. The plane leaves Soviet airspace and continues along its heading to Seoul.
They figured that they'd just been spooked, but that was all over. Unfortunately, for everyone involved, it wasn't.
The airliner is just seconds from flying over the island of Sakhalin.
So Sakhalin was prepared.
KAL Flight 007 enters Soviet airspace for the second time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll soon be serving breakfast before we land in Kimpo, which will be in about 3 hours.
Target traveling at high speed and approaching border.
Target is on your heading.
I can see it both visually and on the screen.
Major Gennady Osipovich, the lead fighter, makes visual contact with Flight 007.
Give warning burst with cannon.
But the warning shots go unnoticed.
Take up position for attack. 'Copy.
1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 0. 1, 2, 3
Approach target and destroy.
Roger, locked on already. Executed launch. Target is destroyed.
The fighter pilot believed the 747 was an enemy spy plane. It takes nearly a decade after shot down KAL-007 for that pilot to tell his side of the story. Investigators have long wondered what Major Gennady Osipovich saw and did after he was ordered to intercept an intruding aircraft in 1983. After nearly 10 years and the collapse of the communist regime, he finally tells his side of the story.
I saw the plane. It did look like a civilian plane because there was a flashing light on its tail and one on the top. But you can disguise any plane like this. You can put a flashing light on and you've got a civilian plane. So I did not have any thoughts about this.
Give warning burst with cannon.
When warning shots are fired, they usually include tracers, which are like flares and are easily seen. However, Osipovich had no tracers loaded in his cannon.
They're supposed to load tracers, just no one had shipped them any for the last 6 months, so they weren't there.
But even without the tracers, Osipovich thinks the 747 crew should have seen him.
As I caught up with him, I was flying like this, and he was flying like that. How could he not turn around and see me? I was flying with lights. Everything was according to protocol. He should have seen me.
And then a horrible coincidence seals the fate of 269 people aboard the flight.
Korean Air 007 requests climb 350.
Korean Air 007, climb and maintain flight level 350.
Like a car going uphill, a climbing plane slows down. But to the fighter pilot following the 747, this is interpreted as an evasive maneuver.
He decreased his speed so that I could either pass him or fall, one of the two. So that's how I knew that he's an enemy intruder. My only thought was to catch and stop. This is what we were trained to do. I fell a little behind him and banked down, made a snake maneuver, put some distance between us, because otherwise the rockets would not have locked on.
He's running out of time because the airliner was approaching international waters.
Take up position for attack.
Roger, locked on already. Executed launch.
Osipovich has 2 air-to-air missiles. They travel 2,000 kilometers an hour towards the jetliner. One of them explodes near the tail, damaging vital controls and hydraulic lines. The warhead also tears a hole in the fuselage, causing a rapid decompression in the cabin.
I saw the first explosion right under the tail, and that's it. The lights of the trespasser went out, and I went home.
Emergency descent. Put the mask over your nose and adjust the headband.
The crew managed to fly the crippled plane for several minutes.
Immediately after the missile impact, the aircraft climbed to flight level 380, and then it descended about 5,000 feet per minute.
The stricken jetliner plummeted towards the Sea of Japan, with most of its passengers likely still conscious.
And that's when the recording stops. Our determination was that the airframe probably broke up at that point.
To this day, Gennady Osipovich is convinced he shot down a spy plane.
I knew they wouldn't order me to intercept if it was a civilian plane or cargo plane. Only if it was a trespasser.
It was clear that he was living with what he had done, and what he had done in order for him to live and to sleep was to believe that it was a spy plane, no passengers on board, that he had not killed 269 people. And that's the way he wants to believe it, and I'm not going to blame him for wanting to believe that.
In 1993, Kai Frostel has the evidence that he sorely lacked when he issued his first report. He can prove how the Korean pilots blundered and ended up off course, and how the Soviet pilot interpreted the situation. The destruction of Flight 007 is ruled an accident. Frostel recommends that all passenger planes be equipped with a clear indicator that the autopilot is in mode.
The tragedy of 007 is that it didn't have to happen. It was not inevitable. It was a series of accidents, a series of misunderstandings, a series of bad decisions that had been primed ahead of time.
Korean 007 has had a great effect on my life. It has been close to my heart. That has been very sad for me. My sympathy and condolences all these years have gone out to the families.